Welcome to another edition of Life, Love, and Philosophy. Today I am initiating a series of programs on the concept of heroism and what famous thinkers in philosophy, literature, religion, and psychology have said about it. Among the questions I shall be addressing are the following. Can one learn anything significant about a culture from knowing who its heroes and heroines are? Who are contemporary America's heroes and heroines? Do fame and achievement always go together? What kind of heroism does one see in one's immediate environment? For example, one's workplace, family, neighborhood. Do we need heroes? Does it matter who a society's heroes and heroines are? The late Professor Joseph Campbell claimed that one of the things he learned from studying the wisdom stories of many different cultures is that each of us has a duty to himself or herself to embark on a heroic journey to a higher level of consciousness. What was Professor Campbell talking about? In this series of programs, I'll be addressing myself to that. Allow me to try to stimulate your thinking and my thinking with a brief overview of what some famous thinkers have said about heroism. First, a dictionary definition. Dictionaries generally give several definitions for heroism, but my research indicated that perhaps the most common definition is this, and this comes from the Oxford English Dictionary. A hero or heroine is a person venerated for his or her achievements in any pursuit. Again, a person venerated for his or her achievements in any pursuit. Historian Barbara Tuchman said this about heroism. A hero is a person of nobility of purpose. Jesus, addressing himself to the concept of heroism, said this: "Whoever wishes to be great among you must be your servant." And Professor Joseph Campbell, whom I alluded to before, commented, "A hero is someone who has given his or her life to something bigger than oneself." American writer Ralph Waldo Emerson stressed virtue. Here are his words: "The essence of greatness is the perception that virtue is enough." And the most famous living Buddhist, the Dalai Lama, talks about personal heroism and uses the expression the conquest of self. Again, here are the Dalai Lama's words on heroism. "The true hero is the person who gains victory over hatred and anger." And Henry David Thoreau commented that a very large number of heroes and heroines never become famous. Again, here are Thoreau's words. "The hero is commonly the simplest and obscurest of men." A famous Greek thinker of antiquity, Aristippus, stressed virtue and perseverance. Again, his own words. "The most impressive spectacle in life is the sight of a virtuous person steadily pursuing his course in the midst of vicious people." Question: can we learn anything significant about a culture from knowing who its heroes and heroines are? Historian Will Durant, I think, provides some illumination. Durant claims that a society's heroes and heroines tells us a lot about that society's values. He compares the heroes and heroines of ancient Greece to Renaissance Italy, to traditional India, to young America. And here are Durant's own words. Greece respected wisdom as Renaissance Italy respected artistic genius, as traditional India has respected holiness, and as young America has respected economic enterprise. He goes on to say this about ancient Greece in comparing its heroes and heroines to other cultures, and here are his own words. The heroes of ancient Greece were not saints or artists or millionaires, but sages. Again, Durant points out that in ancient Greece, it was the wise men who were venerated. For example, Aristotle and famous Greek dramatists such as Sophocles and Aeschylus. In Renaissance Italy, it was the artists very often who were venerated, people such as Michelangelo and Da Vinci. Some historians claim it was not unusual in Renaissance Italy for people to seek the autographs of famous artists. And as Durant pointed out, in traditional India, holy men have been venerated. Perhaps the most famous example is Gandhi. Indeed, historians tell us it was not unusual that people would seek to kiss Gandhi's feet, even though Gandhi very much objected to this and tried to prevent it. Gandhi was looked upon by many Indians as almost a god. And in America, or young America, since we are a young country, relative to Italy and Greece, for example, Durant points out that so often it's been the entrepreneurs who have been the heroes in America. The Rockefellers, the Bill Gates, someone like Jack Welch, former CEO at General Electric, and also many famous entertainers who themselves, in one way or another, are entrepreneurs. Perhaps a good example of that would be Madonna, who seems very good at self-promotion and who seems to have a lot of business acumen. On the subject of America's heroes and heroines, historian Marshall Fishwick, in his book entitled America's Heroes, Myth and Reality, says this, and I'm quoting historian Fishwick. Our heroes, meaning America's heroes, are less apt to exalt wisdom and subtlety than brawn and buffoonery. Again, our heroes are less apt to exalt wisdom and subtlety than brawn and buffoonery. By brawn, I suspect Fishwick is talking about America's love affair very often with athletes. That in our country, it's not unusual that people will actually pay athletes for their autographs. Former Yankee star and hero Joe DiMaggio made much money years after retiring from baseball by going to casinos in Atlantic City and signing autographs for money in the lobbies of these casinos. Again, historian Fishwick says in America, it's also people known for their buffoonery who become heroes. And what he's talking about there is so often in America, entertainers, specifically people who can make us laugh, become heroes. Good examples of that, perhaps, might be Eddie Murphy, the late Johnny Carson, and Seinfeld. Former American newspaper columnist Otis Pike, in talking about our country's heroes and heroines, said this. He said, in America, our heroes are more likely to be people who help us to escape reality than to deal with reality. Actor Tom Selleck provides some illumination here. He said this, and I'm quoting Selleck. In the scheme of things, I'm not as important as Dr. Jonas Salk. And who was Dr. Jonas Salk? Well, first of all, I guess it's fair to assume that many more contemporary Americans have heard of Selleck than Salk. Well, Dr. Salk was a man who discovered the polio vaccine. For some of the young people watching, they may not be aware of the fact that years ago, as late as the 1950s and 60s, for example, many children contracted a lifelong paralysis known as polio, which put these children in wheelchairs for the rest of their lives. Well, Dr. Jonas Salk discovered a vaccine which is given to young children nowadays to prevent them from getting polio. Indeed, this vaccine is given to children all over the world. So it is interesting that while Tom Selleck is more famous among Americans, I think, than Dr. Jonas Salk, I think it's fair to say Dr. Salk's contributions to humanity have been much greater than those of Tom Selleck. And I have little doubt Selleck would agree with that. Today, whom do you think is better known to Americans? Madonna and Britney Spears on the one hand, or Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Dorothy Day, and Rosa Parks on the other hand? I don't think I need to tell any American who Madonna and Britney Spears are, but I don't doubt there are many Americans who have never heard of Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton. These women were 19th century suffragettes. They fought for the right of women to vote in America. As you probably know, it was not until 1920, not until the 20th century, that women got the right to vote in America. And I must tell you, this crusade, led by Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, was not easy. In fact, these women were often mocked by men for even suggesting that women should be able to vote in America. And who is Dorothy Day? Dorothy Day was a very famous female journalist and reformer who fought in some very significant ways for social justice. If anybody had a friend, if any poor people had a friend in positions of power, it was Dorothy Day. And Rosa Parks, of course, was a very famous civil rights activist who first became famous in the South when living under a system of racial segregation, under a system in which black people were automatically supposed to take seats in the back of public buses. Rosa Parks broke the law, an unfair law, I might add, by sitting in the white section of the bus and refusing to get up. She was arrested and, in fact, fined for breaking the law. And what was her contribution? Well, her contribution was enormous, but in this particular case, her contribution was bringing attention to this very unfair system of racial segregation, which so often had the effect of making black people feel inferior to white people. Again, who is better known to Americans today? Leonardo DiCaprio and Tiger Woods on the one hand, or Jeffrey Wigand, Robert Coles, and Ralph Nader on the other hand. And who is Jeffrey Wigand? Well, Jeffrey Wigand was the tobacco industry whistleblower whose information and whose whistleblowing has probably resulted in saving a lot of lives in America. Jeffrey Wigand was a PhD in chemistry who worked for one of America's leading tobacco companies and got fed up with the lying that so many of the tobacco companies were doing. For example, the tobacco companies claimed that it just wasn't true, that there was a connection between smoking cigarettes and contracting serious illnesses. Also, the tobacco companies claimed that nicotine was not addictive. Well, Jeffrey Wigand went public. Again, he was a very highly paid executive of one of America's leading tobacco companies, but he went public and said his company and other tobacco companies were lying, that they knew very well that smoking contributed to causing several diseases, and they knew very well that nicotine was highly addictive. Wigand, of course, lost his job and indeed went from an executive who was being paid $300,000 a year by a leading tobacco company to a teacher making $30,000 a year. And who is Robert Coles? I mentioned before the name Robert Coles. Robert Coles is a psychiatrist and a teacher at Harvard University. And he only spends a small part of the year teaching at Harvard. For much of the rest of the year, this professor and psychiatrist travels to some very poor areas of America and other areas of the world and provides free psychiatric counseling to people who need it. And Ralph Nader. Well, I assume many Americans are aware of who Ralph Nader is. You know that he ran for the presidency some years ago and became a very controversial figure, loved and hated by some liberals and some conservatives. What people may not know, or what many people may not know, is Ralph Nader first became famous as a consumer advocate, and indeed has spent almost his entire working life as a consumer advocate. In the 1960s, as a very young man, Harvard graduate with a law degree from Harvard Law School, Nader wrote a book about the automobile industry entitled Unsafe at Any Speed. And in this book, Nader leveled serious accusations at the auto industry. He said the auto industry was far more interested in producing attractive cars than safe cars. And in his book, again entitled Unsafe at Any Speed, he enumerated the many ways in which automobiles were unsafe and how these unsafe features of automobiles were causing people to die in automobile accidents and to suffer lifelong injuries. General Motors was extremely irate at this young Harvard lawyer's book. And what did General Motors do to kind of get back at Ralph Nader for blowing the whistle on the auto industry? Well, General Motors hired private detectives to follow Nader around, hoping to get some information on him by which they could blacken his character. Nader realized what was happening. He then hired people to investigate the people investigating him. Nader eventually sued General Motors for invasion of privacy. And Nader, representing himself in court, being opposed by a battery of lawyers from General Motors, won. He won his case against General Motors for invasion of privacy. It was a very big financial settlement. And what did Ralph Nader do with almost all of the money he won in the settlement? He established a consumer advocacy group. This again was back in the 1960s. So again, Ralph Nader, whether you like or dislike his politics, whether you like or dislike his politics, no one can deny, I think, that no one in American history has done more to promote automobile safety in America than Ralph Nader. Question: in America, is entertaining people more likely to win one applause and hero status than fighting for social justice? How many Americans who would eagerly seek the autograph of a movie star or athlete would eagerly seek the autograph of a tobacco industry whistleblower or auto industry whistleblower, or somebody doing outstanding work in fighting poverty and disease in this world? Why do you think it is that in America, whistleblowers are usually not among our heroes and heroines? Again, the question, why do you think it is that whistleblowers are usually not among America's heroes and heroines? Did you know that in America we have a school in Brooklyn named after actor John Wayne, but again, no school named after whistleblower Jeffrey Wigand, whom I think it's fair to say, because of his revelations about the tobacco industry, has saved many lives in America? Did you also know that in America we have public schools named after baseball players Pete Rose and Steve Garvey, but again, no public school named after Ralph Nader? And again, Ralph Nader's work in terms of automobile safety has resulted in saving a lot of lives. Why is it presidents of the United States never honor with the highest civilian award, the Medal of Freedom, whistleblowers? Among the recipients, again, of the highest civilian honor in America, the Medal of Freedom, among the recipients have been entertainers Frank Sinatra, Kate Smith, and Tennessee Ernie Ford, but no whistleblowers. Why is that, do you think, that no president has ever honored a whistleblower? President Bush has said that Jesus is his favorite philosopher. Question: if Jesus or Buddha were president of the United States, what kinds of people do you think would be honored at the White House? It's been said that Americans admire tough guys. Well, what does it mean to be a tough guy? Actors such as the late John Wayne, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Clint Eastwood, often regarded as tough guys. In sports, the late famous football coach Vince Lombardi and the late manager of the New York Yankees, Billy Martin, were often described as tough guys. And in politics, Rudy Giuliani and the late President Harry Truman have been described as tough guys. What do you think? Do these people rate the designation tough guys? Allow me to give you a different perspective. Some years ago, I wrote an article for publication on the subject of tough guys. The publication I wrote for gave my article the title, What It Takes to Be Manly. Early on in my article, I pointed out that when I was a young man, football players, I should say, were often among my heroes. But that as I aged and moved into middle age, my concept of tough guys has changed. And let me just quote you a small part of, again, my article on tough guys. These men, again, the men I regard as tough guys, don't play games for a living, and they don't deal with the kind of adversity faced by the quarterback whose team is down by 6 points with 2 minutes remaining on the clock. Rather, they deal with what might be termed real-life adversity. They are men who cannot reasonably expect applause for their successes. Indeed, many have to contend with the distinct possibility of being punished for their victories. You know the type, the political dissident who speaks out against the totalitarian and/or racist system he lives under. Or the whistleblower who is willing to sacrifice his income, career, and quite possibly his good reputation to protect the public. And then there is the idealist who boards a plane for Somalia, Bosnia, or some earthquake-ravaged area to help the needy. But of course, these are the superstars of manliness. These are the superstar tough guys. There are millions of lesser lights. How about the young man who refuses to cheat on a college exam when others are, and who would never consider handing in a term paper not done by himself? Or the middle-aged man who sacrifices a job promotion in an organization that doesn't reward character, but instead rewards being a team player, which can mean going along with a corrupt system. Then there is the elderly man who spends many years taking care of his chronically ill wife. Does American society generally equate toughness with trying to be a very decent person in a world in which evil is often pervasive? What do you think? Is it possible the toughest guy in America is the most moral guy in America? Is it not true that very often it can be very difficult to be very moral and that people can be punished for their goodness? Indeed, you recall a little while ago, I quoted Aristippus, famous Greek thinker of antiquity, who said, and I'm quoting him, "The most impressive spectacle in life is the sight of a virtuous person pursuing his course, steadily pursuing his course in the midst of vicious people." I see I'm running short on time now, so I will continue with this discussion next week. In fact, I pointed out a little while ago that this is the first segment in a series I'm doing on heroism. But let me close with these comments. Is it fair to say that our individual heroes tell us a lot about our values? And is it fair to say that our society's heroes tell us a lot about America's values? As usual, I'd like to close with a quote from Henry David Thoreau. Thoreau, in his masterpiece Walden, penned the following words: "To affect the quality of the day, that is the highest of arts."